Okay, we should be recording now. As I mentioned, this is going to be a Photoshop class. This is Photoshop 1. So we're going to cover the basics. If you know the basics, please be patient. There might be some new things that you learn. I'm going to start off by showing you a little bit of the classroom management that we have. It's all going to be on Canvas, and I think a lot of you already know about Canvas. Many of you already introduced yourself on the introductions discussion, so that's good. So what I'm going to do is go to it. Let's see if I can get the right one that I want. All right. This is how our Canvas course looks. When you go to the home page, that's what you see, the introduction. And completing this course is by going through the modules, and they're laid out by weeks. You can read the syllabus, which outlines basically what we're going to do, and it isolates by week what we're going to learn and what our assignments are. Now, if there's something that you always want to learn about Photoshop and you don't see it in here, let me know and I'll slip that in, we'll cover it. I want to make sure you feel like you learn what you wanted to learn in this class. So take a look at the syllabus to learn how we're going to do this. And then the modules go by week. So for example, here's week 1. You'll see there's week 1. There's week 1 introductions, which is our discussion board. And then there's a non-graded exercise. That's my favorite kind of exercise, non-graded. Because this first week, I want to make sure that you understand how to do discussions on Canvas and how to upload assignments. So each week there will be an exercise and a discussion board for most of them. There's a couple weeks where we don't have a discussion board. One of them is Thanksgiving. Who wants to be discussing things when you've got a lot of food on the table? So we're not going to have a discussion board on Thanksgiving. But for the most part, it lays it out. Week 2 has a class exercise, just like our class exercise for tonight will be the non-graded one. And those are things which you look at on Tuesday, you see what you need to do, and they're due the following Monday. So that's what I mean by a classroom exercise. That's what you'll be working on for the week. In addition, there are 3 main assignments that we will be doing in class. They'll be due on weeks 3, 6, and 9. And those are in addition to the weekly classes, and they're more extended projects, and I'll explain those as we go along. In each week, you have a to-do list, and it's basically read the readings, view the videos, do classroom assignment 1, and preview and start project 1. So this is the first big project that you'll do, and this outlines what the project is. We'll be working on it, so you'll learn about it this week a little bit, and then next week I'm going to do a discussion on it, which is surrealism. And the third week, a little bit after the third week, is when it'll be due to be submitted. The course is broken down by week into readings. These are text things that you can do to read about the items in Photoshop that we're learning this week. And there's usually a bunch of videos that will follow up on what I'm talking about, Photoshop. And then it will tell you what the discussion is for the week. And this week's discussion, you're going to introduce yourself and then submit assignment 1 collage. That's for this week. So that will be due next Monday. You have a week to work on that. If you want to find where to turn those in, you go in the back on the modules, you look at week 1, you'll see the introductions. And that's the discussion board. Well, you'll be able to introduce yourself there. And then to turn in the week 1 assignment, it's right here, non-graded exercise 1. That's where you will submit your Photoshop assignment. Do you have any questions on that? If at any time you have a question, I want you to let me know. I'm in my secret underground bunker during COVID, so I have nothing to do but work and wait for your questions anytime. Just don't call me at 2 a.m. from a bar for a ride home. That's the only request that I have. Other than that, you can call me anytime. My phone number is on the syllabus. That's my cell number, so feel free to call me. You have my email. No question is too dumb. No question is unimportant. I want to make sure that you feel like you're learning. All right. So let's get started on Photoshop. Stop sharing this screen. Now the concept with Photoshop is that it's based on pixels. Now, how many of you have a widescreen TV in your house and you're shopping for one? What's the thing you want to look for to make sure it's really a clear resolution TV? Pixels, right? So if you're going in and you see a TV and it's 720p, that means there are 720 pixels per inch. That's not bad. But right next to it is a 1080p TV. A little bit more money, but that's more clear because it has 1080 pixels per inch. Little bits of information. And then you glance over at the 4K, 4,000 pixels per inch. Oh, I gotta have that one because that's got more pixels per inch. Well, let me explain the pixel concept. Everybody see the strawberries here? Okay. These look identical. One was made in Illustrator and one was made in Photoshop. Illustrator is what we call a vector-based art, where it's mathematical computations of solid color. You do this for illustrations, for drawings, it's just a solid color. Whereas Photoshop is pixel-based. And you tell me, as I zoom in, which one you think is the Illustrator one and which one is the Photoshop one. So I'm going to start zooming in a little bit. They still look the same. Can you see a difference yet? You see the difference in the edges? Yes, Lauren's right. The left one is in Photoshop because you see a jagged edge. Everything in Photoshop is in square pixels. And so everything is made of squares. And as I zoom in, you'll see that the right one is a vector art. It's solid. The left one is Photoshop. It's in pixels. And as I zoom in, you'll see it doesn't look much like a strawberry, but it is. It's a strawberry made out of a bunch of different colored pixels. And you can see that there's no pixel that has more than one color in it. Each will have a solid color. And it's a combination of these pixels that make the image. So at a normal distance, it looks fine. But at close-up, it's just a bunch of different colored squares. So that's what we're dealing with in Photoshop. And if you remember that, that will help you to understand the basis that we do in Photoshop is dealing with pixels. And that the number of pixels per inch is called your resolution. Zoom back out. Okay, so that's covering what we call raster images. The way I used to remember it is I picture Photoshop with a little Rastafarian hat on. It's a raster program. So that is not going to be a test question ever in this class, but it's just to give you an idea, the difference between raster, which is Photoshop, and vector, which is Illustrator. If you were to look at a billboard real close up, it would look like a hot mess, just a bunch of different dots of color. But at a distance of 100 feet, where you're seeing it from the freeway, it looks normal. It's the same way with this. At a certain distance or resolution, it looks normal, but if you get real close up, you can see the construction that it's made of. All right. I'm going to share Photoshop with you here. This is the Photoshop opening screen. And right now I have a few things scattered around. That's because my workspace needs to be organized. And so what I want to do is I want to go into Window, choose Workspace, and the one that you will use the most if you are doing general Photoshop work is Essentials. And that's the one we're on. If you're going to do 3D work, or motion, or painting, or photography, or graphic and web, it will pull up different palettes for you to use. All of them are available at any time, but this makes it easier if you're working on specific types of Photoshop projects. For example, photography will give you different palettes to use. But for everyday use, you'll want Essentials. And there are times where you'll be working and you've moved things around and you go, I can't find my tools. I can't find the color palette. If you ever get all mixed up, just go into Window, go into Workspace, and go to Reset your workspace, wherever you're at. And when you click on Reset, it will organize everything back into normal order. Because that's what happens. I'll work a few hours. Pretty soon I've got every window open. I can't find anything. So I have to go reset it to get the foundational set. Okay. Now, when you make a new canvas for Photoshop, you just click File, New, and it's going to give you some options. There's some standard sizes. You can choose up here, I want a print size. It'll give you letter size, legal size, tabloid A4. If you choose web, it'll give you different web dimensions. So those are shortcuts. But if you don't want to use one of those, you can set your own, and that's over here in the details. And here it says that my width is 8.5. You can type in a number and change that to whatever you want. Height is 11. Let's make it 15 just for fun. And this is what's important, is your resolution. Right now, it's 300 pixels per inch. Now, it depends what you're going to use your image for. If you're going to use your image to print in a magazine or a high print project, 300 pixels per inch is the standard resolution. You don't want it anything lower, and I'll explain why in a minute. If your image is only going to be used on a computer screen or the internet, the default is 72 pixels per inch. And the reason is your computer screen has a certain resolution that will max out at 72. So I know that you may be using a monitor that's 1080p or whatever, but it will just make that image look smaller because, picture this. Have you ever gone to a website and an image starts loading and it takes forever? It starts scrolling up and it's taking forever to load. That's because someone put on their website a 300 pixel per inch image or higher, and it's taking that long to load it because it's so big. The screen can only render 72 pixels per inch. So the two things to remember is that web resolution or screen resolution is 72 pixels per inch, and print is 300 pixels per inch. Now, if you're going to print on your home printer, your HP LaserJet or inkjet, you can get away with 150 to look okay, but the optimal for commercial printing is 300. And that's what you want to remember. Screen is 72 and print is 300. Now, what happens if you want to make an image for both? I'm going to make an image to use in a magazine, but it's also going to be part of an internet promotion. Start out making it the higher resolution. You can always make it smaller as a copy. So picture this. I don't know if many of you remember playing with blocks as kids, but you had blocks and you would make a little tower. So you'd put 3 blocks right next to each other, 2 blocks on top, and then a third one on top, making a little tower, and they're all together. Now that's a certain size. And consider those little blocks as pixels. So my little tower is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 pixels. And your mom comes in and says, make your tower a little bigger. Okay, I don't have any more pixels. That's the number of pixels I have, but I have to make it bigger. So what I'm going to do is space out the 3 bottom blocks. So now there's a gap between them. Space out the 2 that are on top, creating a gap. Then just balance that top one between the 2. So it's bigger. It's the same number of blocks or pixels, but what do I have between the blocks or between the pixels? Space. It's the same thing when you're making an image in Photoshop bigger. If your image is 4 by 4 at 72 pixels per inch, and your client says, I need this at 8 by 8, well, then it's easy. I could just go into image and say, make it 8 by 8. But what Photoshop does is say, okay, you've only got these many pixels, just like you've only got a certain number of blocks. I'll make it bigger and stretch it out, but there's going to be gaps. And what I'm going to do with those gaps is try and guess what goes in there. I'll pick some random color to make it look semi-decent in my mind, is what Photoshop does. You'll find that Photoshop has a mind, and many things it's smarter than me. I don't know how it does it, but it does, and you'll see that. But because Photoshop is trying to make something small big, and not any more pixels are provided, you get an image that they call pixelated. Have any of you seen images on the web that look really crunchy, really fuzzy, rough around the edges? That's because they took an image and made it bigger, and Photoshop played with the spaces to make it look decent, but it doesn't. So a pixelated image is a standard image that was tried to make bigger. You can get away with making it a little bit bigger, but the standard rule of thumb is 10%. Don't try to enlarge an existing image more than 10%, or it's going to start pixelating. You're going to lose the detail and the clarity. Okay? All right, so we're going to assume that this is our canvas. If I go to image size, under image, the image size, you'll see that, oh my gosh, it's huge. That's because Photoshop is telling you what it's like in pixel size. It's 2,700 pixels wide and 45 pixels high. If you choose inches, you'll see, oh yeah, it's 9 by 15, the thing that I picked. But in pixels, that's the size. Sometimes you'll be asked to get an image sized in inches and sometimes sized in pixels. So that's why it has all of these. If you're in Europe, they'll want centimeters. Very rarely do you come across someone wanting picas or columns. So these are the two that you'll use the most, pixels and inches. All right. And the resolution is what we discussed. Let's say you come along and go, oh man, I messed up. It was supposed to be 8 by 10 at 72. Under this image size, we can change it. So let's go 8 by 10. Oh, gotta take off the sample. Okay. Eight. There we go. 8 by 10 at 72. Now this icon right here is a link icon. When it's off like this, I can change these independently. I can make each one a different number. And there's my 8 by 10 at 72. Notice how it looks smaller because I've made the pixels smaller and the size smaller. If I go to image size and I click this link icon on, you'll see that now the width and the height are linked. If I change the width to 5, the height becomes 6.25. So it's going to change it dynamically according to the number you choose. If I choose to unlink the resample box, then all three are linked. If I made this 100, then it's going to change correspondingly the width and the height. Any questions on that? If you do, go ahead, take your mic off, ask away. And any time during this, if you have a question, feel free to speak up, let me know. Okay. Now there's image size and there's canvas size. Let's say that I want to retain everything else, but I want to make the canvas larger. I can make it 9 by 12, and it will expand to fit the size that I want. Now one more time. Image, canvas size, 9 by 12. Now it's 9 by 12. It makes the canvas larger. It won't affect the image inside. Okay. Now, we want to put something on our canvas. So what I'm going to do is show you tonight how to take an image off the internet. So I'm going to share. Some pictures. You may have an idea of where you like to get images to use. I'm going to recommend this one. It's called pexels.com. And what it does is it supplies pictures that you can use for anything, anytime, anywhere, and it's royalty free. And it's open source. So the way to take a picture off the internet is to choose your picture, right click on it, And there's two ways to get it into Photoshop. You can copy the image or save the image. Both ways will provide ways for you to get it in Photoshop. The first one I'm going to do is show you copy image. If I choose copy image, then I go back to Photoshop. Do this here. And I go edit, paste. It will paste the image that I copied into my Photoshop canvas. And you'll notice too, over here in a window called layers, that it is add a new layer. Now there's a tutorial about layers on the week 1, but basically to understand what happens is layers allow you to create different parts of your image and then go back, edit, or move them independently without making everything else move. When I pasted this in, it created a new layer. And every time I paste something in, it's going to make additional layers. That allows me to move this layer independently of the background. So that's the thing to consider, is that layers are essential to construct your image, because you may need to go back and alter something, delete something, move it, change it, and you can do that independently of all the other layers that are there. Otherwise, if you added something and it was all part of the same picture, you would have a big headache going back to try to fix the whole thing. So that's the reason it adds layers. Now, I know as graphic designers, you never make a mistake. I make thousands of mistakes. In fact, that's the benefit of me teaching this course to you, is that I have made every mistake possible in my lifetime. So I can show you what not to do. One of the things you have the option to do is to undo what you last did. And that's either the Control-Z in Windows or Command-Z on a Mac. That will undo what you did. So just I did my move, and I'll undo that. So I'm going backwards. When you get into complicated images, sometimes you have to go back 20 or 30 steps. So I'm going to show you something that you'll want to do as soon as you open your Photoshop. The Preferences palette allows you to change the way Photoshop works on your computer. Under Windows, I believe it's under Edit Preferences. Under a Mac, it's under Photoshop Preferences. And I'm going to go down here to Performance. And a lot of this is blah, 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 but here's the important part. History states. This is the number of mistakes you can make before you can't go back any further. And right now it's on 45, and I know what you're thinking. I will never make 45 mistakes on a project. However, if you are doing an image and doing 10 iterations for a client, it's got all kinds of layers, there are times where you'll realize that 45 is not enough. So here's pro tip number 1. Click on this and move it to the max, which is 1,000. That way you never have to worry about it. If you make 1,000 mistakes, then you're probably needing a break. So just pump that up to 1,000, and you shouldn't have to worry about how many times you go back. All right? Now, the other way to save images is to save them. And so here's some images of the type of dogs I have, Siberian Huskies. Now, I usually, in my introductions, I ask if you're a cat person or a dog person. I don't have any bias. If you're a cat person, that's okay. But just know that I'm a dog person. That's all. So, if you're going to be wanting to look for pictures on Google that you can use, one of the things that you want to know is that there's ways to define what size or type of picture you're going to get. So here, I've chosen search for Husky and images. Over here on tools, you get some options, and one of those is size. Now, one of the problems that we have in class is sometimes students will pick a picture that's too small to look good in their project, and so they'll enlarge it, and what happens is it gets pixelated. So choose large. And that will just pull up large pictures. I'm going to find the picture of the one I want. Okay, so let's choose this one. You'll notice that if you hover over it, it gives the dimensions on the bottom left. That's in pixels. This is 1308 pixels by 1920 pixels. That's pretty good. So I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to save the image. Remember, before we chose copy and we pasted it in. This time I'm going to choose save image. Ask me where I want to save it. I'll save it as Husky. And it's now saved to my desktop. So now, if I go back to Photoshop, instead of going to edit paste, I'm just going to file, open that, go to the desktop, there's Husky right there. Open that, and there it is. So, two things to consider. If you're going to paste an image in, it's going to paste the image in its natural size, no matter how big your canvas is. So if I'm pasting in an image that's bigger than your canvas, you're not going to see all of it. You'll just see parts and you can move it around. If you open a file, it will open the picture, the size and resolution that it is. So I can test and say, okay, image size. It's 6x4 at 4.36 at 300 resolution. So this is a printable picture at 6x4. If I want to test the pixels, I just change it to pixels and it tells me that, yep, it's 1308 by 1920. Exactly what I thought. Okay. Now, tonight I'm going to cover the selection tools a bit. Before I do, I want to ask if there's any questions. Feel free to speak up. And it's okay to speak up and say, I'm totally lost. What's worse is to hear snoring. If that, then I'll know I'm not doing a good job. But if you say you're lost, that's okay. Here's my tip to do Photoshop in a phase. The key to Photoshop is selecting something and then doing something with that selection. That's Photoshop in a nutshell. Because with this picture of a dog, no matter what I want to do, I'm going to have to select something first, whether I select the whole image to change it or a piece of the image. So I'm going to cover tonight the select tools here on the toolbar. Now on the tutorials, There's a great tutorial what each one of these tools does in Photoshop. So I recommend that you look at that when you have time. But tonight we're going to cover the selection tools, because assignment 1 for the week is for you to make a collage of photos that tell me something about you. So for example, if I was to do a collage of husky dogs, you'd know that I love huskies. And that's the type of dogs that I have. Like basketball, then you get a picture of an empty stadium, because that's where they are right now. And I would know that you like basketball. So the key is know how to select things so you can do it. When you open a new picture, you'll see in layers that this is called background. And you'll notice with my move tool, which is the top tool, it doesn't move. I can't move it. It's telling you that it's a background layer. You cannot move a background layer. That's so you don't mess it up. However, if you want it to be a normal layer, the easy thing to do is go to the little lock that indicates that it's partially locked and click on it. And notice my locked background layer is now layer 0. If I want to move it, I can move it. Now, if you look at the canvas behind the image, you'll see a checkerboard pattern. I hope it's showing through on Zoom for you, but that means transparent. If you see that checkerboard, that means that's transparent, there's no color. If it was solid white, that means it's solid white or solid black or whatever color it has. But if it's checkerboard like that, that means transparent. So behind the image, it's all transparent. So let's talk about our selection tools. In Photoshop, if you roll over a tool, it'll tell you what it does. And I'll give you a little demo. Isn't that cool? And if there is a tool that has a little triangle in the bottom right corner, that means there are more tools hiding underneath that. So when I roll my mouse over and I hold down on it, you'll see all the other tools pop out. The rectangular marquee tool, the elliptical marquee tool, the single row and the single column marquee tools. Why do they call them that? And do I need to remember that? Here's why. Photoshop was designed to be a tool for photographers. And so to be marketable to photographers, they wanted to speak the lingo of photographers. They wanted to use the same terms that they used in the darkroom when they've got chemical baths and they've got the enlarger down and using circles cut out in a cardboard plate to focus a circle onto a photographic paper. So all these terms that they used studio photography are the same terms that they use in Photoshop so that photographers would adapt to these terms. So these are terms that they use in photography. Marquee, it's French. Why are they using French terms in Photoshop? Anybody have any idea? Put it out. Someone has to know. Why not Italian? Have you heard of daguerreotype? That is the first type of photographic image that was invented by the French photographer Louis Daguerre. And Louis used these terms because he was French. And because of the daguerreotype and Louis Daguerre's influence on photography, everybody started using the same terminology that he did. So over the centuries, photographers have retained these terms. Rectangular marquee tool, typical marquee tool. I don't care if you know them. If you go to apply to a studio or one of these employment agencies, if you take a test to show your knowledge, You might have to know this, but for this class, I don't care if you call it the square selection tool, the circle selection tool, the round thingy, I don't care, as long as you know what it does. So I'm going to start with the rectangular marquee tool. When you choose that, you'll notice that your cursor has a little crosshair thing. That means that's going to let you draw a target with your selection tool. So I'm going to, let's say I want to copy the dog's nose. I'm going to start here and I'm going to click my left mouse and I'm going to hold it down. And after I hold it down, I'm going to drag it to encompass the area that I want to select. Now you'll see after I let go that my selection is now a bunch of little lines that are going around the nose in a square fashion. It's a highly technical term, we call that. We call it marching ants, believe it or not. Marching ants, because that's what they look like. They look like they're little ants that you're picking, marching around the tablecloth waiting to attack. That means that area is selected. Now remember I said you want to select something and then do something with your selection. Now that I've selected the dog's nose, there's a lot of things that I can do. One of the most common things you'll do is copy and paste. So if I go up here to edit, copy, it's going to copy that selection. The next thing that I want to do is edit, paste. Now there's two things to notice. First of all, you don't see anything pasted. It looks normal. But if you look over at your layers palette, you'll notice there's a new layer, layer 1. And layer 1 is the dog's nose that you pasted in. You just can't see it because it's pasted exactly on top of the nose. However, go to my move tool, which again is the very top tool, and I click and move, then you'll see that the dog's nose that I copied is now its own movable layer. I independently move that, play with it, and it's not going to mess with the layer below it, which is layer 0. Now there's also a link on Canvas that talks about keyboard shortcuts. I use the mouse and the selections a lot because I teach, but a lot of you are real happy with keyboard shortcuts. Well, the keyboard shortcut for pasting is Command or Control V. So every time I do Command V, it's going to paste what I had in memory, nose. So now I've added a layer. And for every time I do that, it'll just add a bunch of noses. Now notice I'm on layer 17. There's 17 on this picture. But because I just have layer 17 selected, only the nose on layer 17 will move. Layer 16, 15, 14, all these will stay the same because I'm not on that layer. I can only focus on the selected layer. If I go to 16, oops, hit layer 0. That's the nose on 16. And so forth and so forth. So what I'm doing is just capturing a bunch of pixels in a square, copying them and pasting them on a new layer. That's the simplest thing you can do in Photoshop, is to copy something and paste it. Select, and in this instance, copy paste. This is kind of what you'll be doing for this week's project. Is you will have a blank canvas. You will want to copy and paste from a group of images and put them together to show a collage about you, something you like, a hobby, a person, a food, something that you like, make a collage. Now, what happens when I realized that I had too many bulls and I went crazy copying and pasting noses? Well, I can select a layer, and you can tell which layer is selected because highlighted, and then I press delete. And as I click delete, you'll see the layers disappear. If you want to get fancy, you can go down to the first nose after the top one selected, hold the Shift key, and click, and it will highlight all the other ones. So instead of doing one by one, you can delete a bunch at a time. And there's that. All right. So let's say that I want to do my collage of dogs. And this is my canvas size here. I want to put 6 pictures of dogs on my canvas. And this one needs to be made smaller. Many of you will look for the little handles to shrink it. Well, Photoshop has a mind of its own. It has its own way of doing things. And I think the people at Adobe that made Photoshop didn't want to be like the group that made Illustrator. Everybody has to do something different. So to change the size of an image, I want to go to Edit, Transform, and Scale. I know what you're thinking. Who thought of that? 3 movements to change the size of something? I know. But that's what we're going to do. Edit, Transform, and Scale. Now you see those little handles. You grab one and use your mouse to make it smaller. You can make it the size you want. And once it's the size that you want, there's a couple ways to set it so that it's completed in its size. You can hit the Enter key or the Return key, or up at the top on this taskbar, just click the check and say, that's fine. When you click a tool, you'll notice that the selection and options in this top bar change. So if I choose the rectangular marquee tool, these are the options that you can do with it. If I chose the lasso tool, this will change. If I choose any of the other tools, you'll notice that this bar up here changes to accommodate variables for that tool. All right. So we've done a rectangular marquee. Let's do an elliptical marquee. That's the circle tool. Again, your cursor changes to a crosshair. Only this time when you click and drag, it's not a square, it's a circle, or an ellipse, or an oval. What I'm going to do is make this bad boy big again. I've got the ellipse tool, and if I draw, you'll see that I have oval here with ants. Now it does the same thing as the rectangular marquee tool. If I copied that and pasted it, which I'll do, the selection I made is pasted in the oval. The thing to remember is because it's pixels, it did not cut any pixels in half. It goes around the pixels. So it's not going to cut a pixel in half. It's going to be on the pixels. So I'll show you again. I'll make a circle here. And I'll zoom in. Do you see how the circle goes around each pixel? It's not going to cut one and a half. Every pixel will be retained. From a distance, it looks like a perfect circle, but in actuality, it's going around the pixels. And here it looks like a circle. Now, when you are drawing the circle and you hold the mouse button and hold it down, you can vary the way the circle works, whether I want an oblong, vertical, horizontal, or an oval. Well, what happens when you want a perfect circle? When you draw your circle, hold the Shift key. It's the same thing with the square tool. If you hold the Shift key when you click and drag, you will keep it a perfect square or a perfect circle. So for those of you who've had 40 cups of coffee and are working on your project and you're all jittery, this will help you to draw a perfect circle without having to eyeball it. The single row marquee tool and single column marquee tool are just that. They will bring down a line and allow you to split your image in a selection. Don't use that a lot. Any questions on that tool in particular? Okay, the next one I'm going to stop sharing this. Yes, they want to sound fancy. Way, if they use French terms, you'll pay more for Adobe Creative Cloud. There we go. All right, so let's go here and look at the car. And the reason I choose cars are because there's lots of complex shapes. I'm going to choose with a white background. Now here's something interesting. If I choose an image to copy and it's 1300 by 67, and I go back to Photoshop and create a new canvas, notice what size the new canvas is, 1300 by 67. Photoshop knows that you have something waiting in memory you copied, and so it tries to be helpful and says, okay, I'll make a new canvas the same size as that image that you copied, which is nice because then paste your image in, it's going to be the size. The lasso tool is basically freehand selection tool. So if I hold my left button and click, I can freehand or try to go around, and you'll notice that I'm doing a horrible job like most people. I can't keep my mouse close. This works really well if you have a pen tablet. But what I'm doing is I'm isolating that. So I've made a selection around the car, And let's say that I want to get rid of this white area behind it. I'm going to go up here to select and select inverse because the car is selected. By choosing select inverse, it's going to select everything outside the selection. I hit delete and there you go. Remember, checkerboard is transparent. So I go to select and deselect. And now I'm done. But notice I still have some white around here. So next week we'll talk about using the pen tool, the selection tool. It's much more refined, but this shows you what this tool does. It's for freeform. The polygonal lasso tool is, in my 21 years of owning a graphic design studio, I used it maybe 3 times. Because when you use this, you click, draws a line. Now what I've done is I've clicked and let go, and now the polygonal lasso tool is saying, all right, I'll draw a line till you tell me to stop, and where stop. So stop right there, I click, and look, now I'm going to start another line. Click. The thing never ends. Click, click, click. Guess you can make mountain ranges or dinosaur teeth. You can come back, click. And you're thinking, how do I get this infernal thing to stop? The way you get it to stop is go back where you started. And notice a little circle shows up with the lasso tool. It means you can click, and there you go. Your selection is done. So that's the polygonal lasso tool. I'm going to go up here, select, deselect. Notice Photoshop, the keyboard shortcuts are next to the action that you will take. So to deselect, you could do Command D or Control D on Windows. Third part is the magnetic lasso tool. And this is where Photoshop's brain comes in. Photoshop knows that this is dark pixels and this is light pixels. So if I take my magnetic lasso tool, named because it sticks like a magnet to the edge of 2 different color pixel ranges, and I just start going like this, notice how this thing is going to start wrapping it around the car. As soon as I get close, I don't have to be exact, but it's going to magnetize itself to this car. Like I said, you got to be nice to Photoshop because it's so smart, you never know if when you're sleeping, it's going to be standing next to your bed. It's very smart. Try it again. Just move your mouse along the edge. And because it notices the difference in the pixels, it's going to stick like glue to the edge that you're trying to make. And so now it's made a selection. And again, the way you get it to make the marching ants is to connect with the first spot that you made. Now if I select the inverse and delete, see how much cleaner that edge is than me trying to do it by myself. So that's a tool that you can use if you have an object like that. Third selection tool I'm going to use is the Object, Quick, and Magic Wand tool. The Object tool is pretty new. If you haven't been with Photoshop for a few years, This is pretty an object. So it's telling you there's crosshairs and a little square, which means, okay, whatever object you want to select, click and draw the square over it. And then let go, and it's going to calculate where that object is and make a selection around it. This is pretty scary stuff. It knows how to do that. So if you had a picture of a person and you wanted to isolate that person from the background, you could use this tool to just go over the person, let go, and that person will be selected. That's the object selection tool. So if I copied that, made a new image, and paste in, you'll see, remember the checkerboard is transparent, so what's transparent is showing that the car is selected itself. Next to your layers, you have eyeballs. If you don't want to see a layer, just click on the eyeball and it will go off. All right. Here's the quick selection tool. It's for very rough selections. Just click and drag and it's gonna estimate differences. Notice it's selected most of the car, but part of the bumper is gone. It's adaptable a little bit, like enhance the edge. But the one that I use the most is the magic wand tool. The magic wand tool is used to select a range of pixels, generally the same color or close to it, so you can select a range of pixels of the same color and get rid of it. For example, I wanted this white background to disappear. Click on the white. You'll notice that it selected all of the white except here where the shadow makes it a bit gray. So if I want to add to my selection, I'm going to hold the Shift key and notice there's a little plus next to my magic wand. That will allow me to click in this area that's not selected and add it to my selection. Selected. Now remember, it's the white area that's selected and not the car. And the way you see that is there's marching ants on the outside edge of the picture. That means all this area is selected in the car alone. If I wanted to select the car, I could select the inverse. Now there's no marching ants on the outside, which means the car itself is selected. And I can do anything that I want. Last part that I'm going to show you is feathering. I don't know how many Zoom meetings you had during the day, but we're almost, we're close to an hour, and these start getting long after an hour. So I'm going to show you feathering, and then what I'll do is I'll turn you loose on this week's project. You know enough to do that, and you can look at all the tutorials. I'll post this recording so that you can view it again if you'd like. But feathering is in the toolbar on the selection tool here, at the taskbar at the top. Right now it says feather 0 pixels. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's feather this 10 pixel. What that means is when I draw a selection, it's going to take a range of 10 pixels from the edge of my selection and make it go from solid to transparent. So there will be a fade of 10 pixels at the edge of the selection. So let me show you what that means. I've given it a feather of 10 pixels. I've drawn my selection. I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to paste in. And you can see how edges got a blur. That's because it goes from solid to transparent in a 10 pixel range. If I increase the feather, and the feather range depends how big the picture is. If the picture is small, a feather of 10 pixels might be too much. If the picture is large, like this one, 10 might be enough to get the effect that you want. I'm going to make it 25. Then I'm going to draw a picture. Now notice, because it's a feathered at 25, the corner's round, showing you that, hey, there's a feather in this. So now I'm going to copy this again. Go to File, New. Remember, it's going to keep the same size because it knows what's in memory. Paste it. There you have another French term, a vignette on the edge. So this is how you make those nice little frosted images on the side. By feathering it. It'll go from solid to transparent in the range of pixels you tell it to. In this case, it's 25. A little bit artistic. The same thing with the elliptical marquee. Let's make it 30 pixels or 35. Play around with it. And I will tell you right now, the best way to learn Photoshop is to just mess with it. Destroy as many pictures as you can. You'll learn how to use these tools and do whatever you can. So I'm going to try the elliptical marquee tool at 35 pixels. And I'm going to copy that. File, New. Paste that in. You see how it creates that vignette around it. That's the feather tool. So that's how you get those old-timey pictures. And that's for the selection tools that you'll need to know this week. What I'd like you to do is look at the assignment project for this week. And what you'll do, I believe it's 8 by 10 inches. Now, I don't care if it's 10 by 8 or 8 by 10, your choice. I believe the resolution is going to be 150. Okay, so this is going to be my canvas. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to collect a bunch of images of something that tells about me. You can put a background image in, like if I was going to do husky dogs, I'd do snow. And then I would get a bunch of other pictures and paste them in and size them to make a collage. The kind of thing that your mom would want to put on her refrigerator door. All right? So if I look up Photoshop collage, this second here. So here's a video how to create a four-sided collage. So this is taking images and you're placing them over a background to tell about something you like, hiking or outdoor, and you can place them in various positions. So what I'm going to do is I will put this in the tutorials for this week. You can see them. And that's it for this week. Just enough? Your brain full? Some are going, yeah. Some are going, I'm lost. Some are it's way too much. Here's the key. If during the week you go, I feel lost. You know my phone number. You know my email. I'll do a personal Zoom with you, whatever you need. I know this is an asynchronous class, but I can't help it. I'm a people person. I teach face-to-face, and it's hard for me to feel like you're struggling on your own. So I will do whatever it takes to get the concepts across for you. You will never bother me. Okay?
When is this ungraded assignment due?
Next Monday, by next Monday. Okay, so the assignment that's that I give for the classroom assignment, it's called classroom assignment. I start every week on a Tuesday. And the assignment that's given for that week will be due the following Monday. So it gives you a week to work on it. Because there's a lot of tutorials to look at, a lot of reading that you'll want to do. So that's why I've organized it that way. And like I said, the basis of this is for me to know that you're learning the concepts. I don't do tricks like, yeah, I know that I said 150 pixels, but you're at 149, so I'm going to mark you off. Come on. We're all adults here. So it's just the concepts I want you to learn. I want you to feel like you're progressing and you're learning and you're creating things. Okay? Do you have any questions? All right. I will put this recording up on Canvas for week 1, so you can refer to it if you need to. Other than that, if you don't have any questions, then go to it. Enjoy the course. And the biggest thing I can do is tell you, play with Photoshop. You'll see all there is. So until next week, I'll have another web conference. You don't have to come to it. I'll record that one too. But if you want to come on and ask questions and see what's going on and you've got nothing else to do at 6:30 on Tuesday night, I'll be here. All right? Thank you, everybody.
Have a good one.
All righty.
Great one.
Bye.